I don't know what it is, or it's some recent times, but Chicago, like many other major cities, it is different and it's changing, especially after that election. And you know exactly what.
Chicago's Black leaders are supposed to have our back. But what if they're helping everyone else instead? Stay tuned, because what's happening on the West Side will shock you. Chris Welch stands out as a remarkable figure in American politics. Hailing from Illinois, he is both a skilled lawyer and a dedicated Democratic politician. He represents the 7th District in the Illinois House, but his achievements go far beyond holding office. In a historic milestone, Welch became the first Black individual to serve as Speaker of the Illinois House of Representatives, a position of considerable influence. Clearly, this isn't just any political player, he's a force to be reckoned with. So, when a recent clip featuring him surfaced, it left many viewers genuinely puzzled, curious to see him in action.
With Governor Pritzker, that you want federal law enforcement to work with local law enforcement to get rid of criminal illegal aliens.
Let me begin by answering that question with telling you I don't believe anyone is an illegal alien. That's a terrible term to use about anyone.
It's a legal term.
It's not a legal term. They used to call Black people slaves legally, and it was wrong. Let's stop dehumanizing people. Let's start treating people right.
Here's where it gets thought-provoking. Chris Welch draws a striking comparison between the term illegal and the word slave. He suggests that labeling someone as an illegal immigrant, someone residing in a country without authorization, can carry a dehumanizing weight similar to the historical trauma embedded in the word slave for Black Americans. It's a bold statement that highlights the power of language and its impact on human dignity. And he's far from alone in making such connections.
Legal aliens. I don't know if that's
well. That's the legal term. Well, I'm not going into the political.
The legal term for my people were slaves. You want me to use that term too?
If
so look,
want,
let's just get the language right. We're talking about undocumented individuals that are human beings. The last thing that I'm going to do is accept the type of racist, nasty language to describe human beings.
Mayor Brandon Johnson is echoing the same point as Chris Welch, using this comparison as a way to sidestep the deeper debate. Critics argue it's a classic straw man tactic. Instead of addressing the complex realities of illegal migration, they pivot to the emotionally charged comparison. Calling someone illegal is like calling someone a slave, and watch the applause roll in. Meanwhile, the substantive questions remain unanswered. Why allocate public funds to individuals who may not contribute economically to Cook County or Chicago, potentially at the expense of actual citizens? This perspective resonates with many in the community. Commenters have voiced frustration at the way politicians often conflate struggles, blending the Black experience with the experiences of others, while failing to address issues uniquely affecting Black residents. One user sharply pointed out, "We have our own struggles. We don't need them merged with someone else's." Another person brought a factual clarification. The term alien simply refers to someone not native to a place. By this logic, an illegal alien is someone in a country without authorization. Yet others argue that equating the term illegal alien with slave is historically and conceptually inaccurate. A slave was literally someone who was considered property, stripped of all rights, a reality that cannot be compared to immigration status. What makes this discussion even more complex is that both Welch and Johnson are Black men, married to Black women, and successful in political office. Many believe they should be championing the issues affecting their own community, yet their priorities sometimes appear elsewhere. This has fueled frustration among residents, especially on Chicago's West Side. One longtime resident lamented that, at 38, she sees her neighborhood in worse condition than it was in her childhood, despite all local leadership being Black. Brandon Johnson highlights his connection to the West Side, claiming he has lived and worked there. Yet critics point out that visible progress is lacking, and for many residents, this gap between leadership and tangible community improvement is painfully obvious. The conversation continues, blending politics, accountability, and the ongoing struggle for equity in communities that feel overlooked.
Hella construction in my neighborhood right now. When I say hella construction, they tearing up everything. Y'all, I literally ride through the neighborhood, or I get up and I walk, you know what I mean, just to see what's going on. I ain't seen a black person yet on one of these construction sites. I stopped at a construction site last week taking my baby to school. I counted 21 people on this site, not one of them.
On the west side of Chicago, renovations are happening, but according to residents, the crews doing the work are almost entirely non-black. Buildings get spruced up, yet black men and women who live in these neighborhoods are noticeably absent from the jobs. When politicians try to link the struggles of illegal migrants with the black community's historic challenges, the results can feel starkly unfair. Even when the conversation comes from leaders who are black and speak about black and brown communities, the outcome sometimes seems to be displacement rather than empowerment. Some residents might accept blending struggles if it meant tangible benefits for their own community, but in this case, the West Side appears to be facing gentrification, not investment. Neighborhoods remain in disrepair, housing projects like the Cabrini Green site are left neglected, and longtime black residents see resources diverted elsewhere. When migrants arrive, from Venezuela, South America, and other regions, suddenly there's funding to renovate apartments, provide services, and offer support. Yet hardworking black Chicagoans, many of whom are homeless, often cannot access the same resources. This stark contrast underscores deep inequities in how aid and development are distributed. Adding another layer, a woman who once lived on the West Side and later moved to Chicago's North Side shared an interesting experience. On her birthday, she went out on a Thursday night to a speakeasy-style restaurant, and what she saw there captured her attention.
When I tell you that the waiter walked up to me and said, "Are you lost? Are you sure you're supposed to be here?" Now, mind you, you cannot come up. You have to walk up a whole flight of stairs just to be into this place. And you have to wait over an hour for entry. And most likely you have to make reservations on a very busy night. And I went on an average night on a random Thursday because that's the day my birthday landed on. So when she came to me saying, "Are you sure you're supposed to be here?" I looked around. I've been looked around and saw my people was.
While celebrating her birthday at a North Side Chicago restaurant, this woman had set aside time, made reservations, and dressed up for the evening. But her night took a sour turn when a waitress approached her with a pointed, disrespectful question. "Are you supposed to be here? Are you sure you're in the right place?" She glanced around and realized, to her dismay, that she didn't see anyone who looked like her. Her experiences in the city only compounded the frustration. On one occasion, when she first moved to the neighborhood, a restaurant outright refused to serve her, pretending to be closed. Yet minutes later, a non-black couple walked in and was seated immediately. Over time, she admits, she's become almost numb to these encounters, a sad testament to how commonplace such discrimination feels in her day-to-day life. Not every black person films or broadcasts these experiences online. Some endure them silently and simply move on, but the pattern is consistent. This paints a stark contrast across Chicago. On the West Side, black residents face neglected infrastructure and underinvestment, despite having black leadership. On the North Side, black people can be openly questioned about their right to occupy spaces, even in a city that is more than 30% black. This dual reality underscores the gap between leadership rhetoric and lived experience. Part of the issue, she argues, comes when black struggles are equated with the struggles of other communities. In doing so, the communities that benefit are often not the black communities that bore the brunt of historical and systemic oppression. She points to misconceptions about Latinx history in America, noting how some claim Latinx people are the oldest ethnic group or the builders of America. In reality, black Americans have been in the United States since 1619, enduring slavery, oppression, and systemic exclusion for centuries. Territories such as California, Arizona, and Texas were only incorporated into the U.S. after the Mexican-American War in 1848, meaning the narrative that Latinx people predate black Americans in the country is historically inaccurate. When struggles are conflated, the result is that non-black groups often adopt black advocacy language, claim its moral authority, and channel benefits to their own communities. Meanwhile, Black residents can be displaced from neighborhoods, ignored in policy, and marginalized socially. This woman observes that even among Latinos, disparities persist. White passing or lighter-skinned Latinos often receive advantages, for Latinos face the harshest barriers. Her broader point is clear. Communities must fight for those who are most vulnerable, the ones historically overlooked or actively marginalized, even when broader alliances or political gestures seem to blur lines. Ignoring these realities perpetuates inequity, both in Chicago neighborhoods and in America more broadly. The discussion then turns to Latinos. One individual identifies as a white Latino and acknowledges that he benefits from white privilege, while darker-skinned Latinos in his own community do not. This candid admission highlights a long-standing problem. Even within communities that include Black people, colorism and discrimination persist. This raises a critical question. Why are communities allowing groups with internal anti-Black sentiments to be included in broader social struggles and policy initiatives, especially when these groups may already harbor prejudice against Black people? He argues that this is exactly what's happening. Some non-Black communities are benefiting from resources and political focus while failing to support the Black people already present in their neighborhoods. The concern grows more urgent in light of recent developments in Chicago. Hundreds of undocumented immigrants are set to be released this Friday after being detained by ICE and Border Patrol. A district judge, Jeff Cummings, issued the order following a lawsuit by a civil rights group, noting that roughly 85% of those detained had no criminal record. Yet questions arise. Isn't being in a country illegally a crime in itself? Many argue that it is, pointing out that legal systems worldwide treat undocumented entry as a punishable offense. For instance, in Uganda, anyone found in a country without a valid visa risks arrest or deportation, an unmistakable enforcement of criminal law. Some Black politicians have drawn controversial parallels, equating undocumented immigrants with the historical oppression of Black Americans under slavery. Critics argue this comparison is deeply flawed. People who arrive illegally and access public resources do not face the systemic and generational oppression endured by enslaved Black Americans. They are operating in a fundamentally different context. The deeper concern, she emphasizes, revolves around the role of Black political leadership in cities with substantial Black populations. In theory, elected officials from within the community should serve as advocates for policies, programs, and initiatives that uplift the neighborhoods and residents they represent. They should ensure that resources are allocated equitably, that housing, schools, and employment opportunities are strengthened, and that the historical inequities faced by Black communities are addressed head-on. In practice, however, the reality is often starkly different. Too frequently, these leaders prioritize policies that benefit outside interests, cater to political machines, or address the needs of newer, non-Black constituencies, rather than focusing on the communities that initially elected them. History provides numerous examples of this pattern. Take Eric Adams, for instance. When he rose to prominence in New York politics, many supporters viewed him as a champion of the Black community, someone who would prioritize public safety, education, housing, and economic development for historically marginalized neighborhoods. Yet critics argue that, during his tenure, Adams pursued policies that aligned with broader city agendas, benefiting corporate entities and affluent groups, while often overlooking the grassroots needs of Black communities. Similarly, in Chicago, Brandon Johnson rose to political prominence with strong community backing, particularly from West Side residents and local activists who believed in his promise to prioritize the struggles of Black neighborhoods. Yet, as his policies unfolded, some critics say they increasingly favored initiatives that served external populations, including immigrants and other non-Black communities, leaving long-standing constituents feeling neglected and sidelined. This pattern is not unique to any single city or leader. It reflects a structural issue embedded in the dynamics of urban politics. Political machines, party hierarchies, and the pressure to maintain broad-based coalitions often push Black leaders into making compromises that dilute their ability to serve their original constituencies. As a result, a recurring cycle emerges. Leaders are elected with high hopes. They implement policies that may benefit outside groups more than the Black communities that supported them. They face criticism or scandals, and eventually, they are replaced. The replacement leaders frequently step into the same system, repeating the same mistakes because the underlying political and structural pressures remain unchanged. For residents, this means generations pass without substantial progress, with neighborhoods continuing to experience disinvestment, gentrification, and a lack of resources that directly improve local quality of life. The consequences of this cycle are profound. Take, for instance, the west side of Chicago. Long-standing Black neighborhoods have experienced decades of underinvestment, with schools that lack funding, housing projects that deteriorate, and community services that are insufficient to meet the needs of residents. Yet when city resources are suddenly allocated, for example, to renovate apartments or provide housing for immigrant communities, the existing Black population often sees little benefit. Residents feel replaced, their voices marginalized, and their contributions overlooked. This dynamic creates a profound sense of betrayal, where the people who supported and elected leaders feel abandoned, while others who may have only recently arrived receive preferential attention and resources. Moreover, this pattern extends beyond economics and housing. Social cohesion and cultural identity are also affected. When leadership consistently prioritizes external communities, it sends a message that the struggles, history, and contributions of Black residents are secondary. The result is not just physical displacement, but also the erosion of cultural influence, political voice, and communal solidarity. Younger generations growing up in these environments may internalize a sense of powerlessness, believing that their community's needs will never be a priority, no matter how actively they engage in civic life. This has long-term implications for political participation, community activism, and intergenerational empowerment. Another dimension of the issue involves the delicate balance of representation and coalition building. Modern politics often demands that leaders address multiple constituencies simultaneously, which can be a legitimate challenge. However, when coalition building comes at the expense of the community that elected the official, it becomes exploitative. Equating the struggles of Black Americans with those of other groups, particularly in ways that ignore historical context or existing inequalities, risks diluting advocacy and reinforcing systemic marginalization. Critics argue that this is precisely what has happened in cases where Black leaders highlight the struggles of immigrant communities while failing to meaningfully address long-standing disparities in Black neighborhoods. The consequence is a misalignment of priorities, where leaders' rhetoric appears inclusive, but their policy actions fail to deliver equity for their original base. The impact is particularly visible in education, housing, and economic development. Schools in Black neighborhoods continue to face underfunding despite promises from elected officials. Affordable housing projects are often repurposed for non-Black populations, while historically Black neighborhoods see rising rents and gentrification that displace families. Small business support and economic development programs frequently overlook Black entrepreneurs in favor of initiatives that cater to wealthier or politically influential newcomers. The cumulative effect is a widening gap between the promises of political leadership and the lived realities of Black residents, further entrenching cycles of poverty, displacement, and disenfranchisement. Ultimately, she calls for awareness, accountability, and action. Black communities must recognize these systemic dynamics and actively demand that leadership genuinely prioritize their interests. This requires holding elected officials accountable, advocating for policies that reflect historical and ongoing inequities, and refusing to allow external interests to supersede the needs of the community. Leaders who are elected to serve Black neighborhoods must be evaluated not by rhetoric alone, but by tangible results: equitable resource distribution, meaningful investment in infrastructure, protection of cultural and community spaces, and programs that empower residents economically, socially, and politically. The stakes are high. Without sustained vigilance, advocacy, and strategic community engagement, Black communities risk further displacement, marginalization, and disenfranchisement. This cycle of leaders being elected, failing to deliver for their constituents, and being replaced by others who repeat the same patterns will continue. To break this cycle, residents must collectively insist on accountability, intersectional equity, and policies that strengthen Black neighborhoods first and foremost. Only by doing so can they safeguard the long-term health, growth, and survival of Black communities in Chicago and across the nation.